Hi, welcome to the Louie File. You know, if you read the Gospels, you'll discover that Jesus had his biggest troubles, biggest conflicts with the religious leaders of his day. I mean, every time you turn around, they're accusing him of breaking the law of Moses. And they said that he was a friend of publicans and sinners. He hung out with prostitutes and drunkards. They even called him a wine bibber, as though he was a drunkard. It's quite amazing, really. And I used to always think, well, it's religious people. And I guess it is religious people, you know, but if you go on further into the Bible, into Paul's letters, you see that he had his conflicts, his share of conflicts with the religious people of his day too. And I've come to realize that basically what this really boils down to, I think a better way of describing it is law people versus spirit people. And that's what you run into in the scriptures. You run into the religious establishment that they were trying to keep the law of Moses. And when Jesus came along and John the Baptist introduced Jesus to the world, and then Jesus picked his disciples, and they were hanging out with Jesus, walking along. They were doing things on the Sabbath, specifically Jesus, healing people. They were picking corn or whatever and eating. They didn't wash their hands properly according to the religious leaders. It seemed like every time they turned around, somebody was on their back about doing something. You can't do that on the Sabbath. Jesus, I think, was showing us what it looked like to walk according to the Father, walk in the Spirit. Now, of course, his disciples didn't really fully get him, but they were attracted to him, and they loved him, and they wanted to be with him. And he got frustrated with them from time to time, and they were hard-headed, you know. I mean, so he really had something to do. He had to deal with the religious leaders, and he had to deal with hard-headed disciples. But the good news is Jesus told them and us, according to the scriptures, that, you know, once he went through the cross, the burial and the resurrection, and that he ascended back to the Father, that he was going to send the Spirit, and that the Spirit would move into his disciples. Even to this day, he moves into us as we open ourselves to him and receive Christ. We receive the Holy Spirit, and we become a spirit person. But that doesn't stop the conflict. Even today, there are a host of people that are law people, and they will always be the enemy of the spirit people. In fact, in Galatians chapter 4, I believe it is, the Apostle Paul used the illustration of Ishmael and Isaac. Way back from the book of Genesis, Abraham and Sarah had problems, or they couldn't have a child. God had promised they would, but they couldn't. It didn't seem to be happening. So Sarah came up with this plan to give her maid, her handmaiden, her slave girl to Abraham to have this child with. So Abraham and Hagar, the handmaiden, came together and they had Ishmael. Well, Paul uses that as a picture of a legal, he was a legal or a law, legally he was a son. But he wasn't the son of promise that God was giving them. He gave them Isaac later, of Abraham and Sarah, and we see in the story where Ishmael was mocking Isaac. And the Apostle Paul tells us that it's the same even to this day, that the legal son, the law-keeping son, still mocks the spirit of the child of promise even today. So if you're walking and living in the Spirit, you're living in the promise of God, then you automatically are in conflict with those that are walking according to law. Isn't that something? I hope I explained this well enough for you to get a hold of this. But check it out in Galatians 4. It's a pretty amazing analogy that Paul uses with Sarah and Hagar and Ishmael and Isaac to explain law people and spirit people. So then he encourages the Galatians to remain spirit people. Don't become a law person. You know, in fact, the law itself can't make us right with God. Maybe I'll talk about that in the next video. All right, but thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later.